Well, good morning, East Alabama and West Georgia. Dr. Don with you on your Thursday, January 9th, 2025. It is 6:58 a.m. Central, 7:58 a.m. Eastern, and we are now within 24 hours of the much-anticipated winter storm across the southeastern United States. Before we get into the particulars as we know them at this time, let me start this morning's conversation by saying this. We always say this, and I have mentioned it multiple times over the last week and a half since we've been talking about this possibility, that forecasting winter weather in the South is incredibly difficult, if not almost impossible. Folks, you have to understand, snow is not made for Alabama and Georgia. It's not supposed to do that here. Does it snow here? Yes, it does occasionally, but it is an anomaly. It's not something that is supposed to happen. That's why we live in the southeastern United States. That's why we don't live in the upper Midwest or around the Great Lakes. It's just, we're not supposed to get snow down here. So it is incredibly difficult to forecast it because there are multiple facets that have to be considered when you're forecasting winter weather. It's not just a simple matter of throwing some cold air and some water out there and, hey, boom, you've got snow. It's a very complex process that takes place to get snowfall and meaningful accumulation in the southeastern United States. You have to consider surface temperatures. You have to consider air temperatures at multiple different levels in the atmosphere. You have to consider the precipitation, where it comes from, how much there is. Will we see a CAD effect? That's cold air damming that comes back down from the northeast. Will there be a warm layer of air in the upper levels of the atmosphere? When the moisture comes off the Gulf of Mexico, that's always a good possibility. And I think that is going to be a huge factor in what we actually end up receiving tomorrow. A nose of warm air in the upper levels of the atmosphere is going to be a very key player in what we actually end up seeing, which should be underway in about 24 hours across East Alabama and West Georgia. So I've been doing a lot of reading this morning and looking at a lot of comments from meteorologists at different National Weather Service offices across Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. And it appears to me that all of the forecasters at the National Weather Service offices across the Southeast are in very good agreement that the warm nose, you're going to hear that term a lot today, is going to play a major role in how this thing evolves as we get into tomorrow morning. And here's what happens. So we've got a low-pressure system that's going to form down in the Gulf of Mexico, or maybe it's the Gulf of America, who knows, somewhere off the coast of Texas or southern coast of Louisiana. And then we know the cold air is already going to be in place. Heck, it's in place out there right now. It is freezing outside. And that's not really going to go anywhere. We'll warm up a little bit today, but then as the sun falls this afternoon, we're going back into the deep freeze. So we'll have cold air in place from the top to the bottom. I mean, the entire column will be frozen when the precipitation starts sometime after midnight tonight, probably toward daybreak. So cold air is not a problem, right? Okay, it's here. And then that low pressure forms in the Gulf, and then it moves off to the east, maybe a little bit northeast, and it starts wrapping up that moisture out in the Gulf of Mexico. Well, we know that the air temperatures out in the Gulf of Mexico are much warmer than what we've got across East Alabama and West Georgia. So as that low pressure system starts spinning out in the Gulf of Mexico, it starts picking up that warm air and it starts pushing it over the southeastern United States in the upper levels of the atmosphere. You may not realize it at the ground, at least not initially. And then that warm air pushes up, maybe 10, 15, 20,000 feet up in the atmosphere. It's called a warm nose. So that just kind of lifts up over the southeastern United States. The precipitation falls down through that. It starts off warm, then it freezes, and then you get snow, and it starts falling. It starts hitting the ground. But then as the day progresses tomorrow morning, that warm nose picks up more and more and more of that warm moisture and warm air off of the Gulf and continues to override the cold air at the surface until eventually that warm air makes it all the way down to the ground or just above the surface of the ground, and it changes the frozen precipitation over to a mixture and then eventually all liquid. And that's what we believe is going to happen across East Alabama and West Georgia during tomorrow's event. Now, here's the $64 million question, and it's hard to answer this. We can give you the best idea, but it's hard to be specific as to exactly how deep that layer of warm air is going to be, and how far north is that warm nose going to push, and what's the timing on all of this. So right now, and it's depicted here very well on the graphic that you see because we have upgraded North Alabama to a winter storm warning. That happened earlier this morning. And then across East Alabama, for the moment, we have a winter weather advisory from the I-20 corridor down to the I-85 corridor. And that lines up pretty good with what we told you last night when we did our last Weather Talk Live. So we think what's going to happen is East Alabama, Georgia hasn't pulled that trigger just yet, but that's probably coming at any moment. We think East Alabama, West Georgia will start off as all snow. And that'll happen sometime after midnight tonight. There are signals this morning with the models that this may come in a little bit sooner than originally thought. So right now we're seeing anytime after midnight. You could start seeing precipitation across East Alabama and West Georgia. I still think it's going to be closer to sunrise before you get into the good stuff. But anytime after midnight, we could see some snowflakes. You start off, I think, for the majority of you, will start off as all snow. Now, down there along the I-85 corridor, it may start as a mixture of snow, sleet, maybe a little bit of freezing rain with a few liquid raindrops mixed in there. And then as you go north from I-85 up to I-20, that transition, you'll go from a light mixture up to maybe all snow by the time you get to Lafayette, Roanoke, and then certainly up there at the I-20 corridor, it'll be all snow for several hours tomorrow morning. I think by the time we get to mid-morning, and I'm calling mid-morning 9, 10, 11 a.m., that warm nose will push far enough to the north to change everything over to a cold rain. The snow, the sleet, any freezing rain that were to accumulate will go away by the time we get mid-morning tomorrow morning between I-85 and I-20, both in Alabama and in West Georgia. So any travel issues that do occur tomorrow morning will go away. They will not be long-lived. This is not going to be an all-day event for East Alabama and West Georgia. So if there are travel issues tomorrow morning, we're only looking at those type conditions for 3, maybe 4 hours, and then things start to improve as we approach the noon hour or certainly by the time we get into the afternoon. So what about amounts? Well, I mean, it's pretty easy to look at the graphic there and tell that the amounts are going to be lighter in those blue areas and then heavier up there in the pink areas. But here's the latest graphic showing what we think is going to happen. Now, understand, this is not going to be exact. There are going to be some folks that's going to get a little more than what we're showing on this graphic. There are going to be some folks that maybe get less than what we're showing on this graphic. That's just the way it works. But for now, at least, we're talking between the I-85 and the I-20 corridor, we're talking a trace. Now, that's most likely going to be a dusting on grassy areas, cold rooftops, the tops of your automobiles. And then by the time you get up there to the I-20 corridor, we start to see some meaningful accumulation. We're talking a half inch, maybe a half inch up to 3/4 of an inch along the I-20 corridor. And then when you approach the Gadsden, Coleman area, we're closer to an inch, maybe an inch and a half. And then you get up there to around Huntsville, 1 to 2 inches. And then right there along the Alabama-Tennessee state line, across the Tennessee Valley regions, we're talking 2 to 3 inches of snow. Again, all of that depends on how strong the warm nose of air and the upper levels of the atmosphere will be, the timing of when it starts to overtake the snow and change it to liquid, and how far north that goes. All of this is going to play a huge factor as to how much the snow totals are once all is said and done, and how long we deal with travel issues across East Alabama and West Georgia. Also understand, we're 24 hours out, so there are going to be multiple model runs between now and then. We start to see real data now because the National Weather Service offices release a weather balloon. Been doing that since the beginning of weather records, so we're still using old methods with new technology to forecast the weather. So as they release those weather balloons, we get real-time current weather data information that's plugged into the models, and that helps hone in the forecast. So multiple balloon releases will take place between now and tomorrow morning, which will help us fine-tune this forecast also. Could it change? Absolutely it could. Some of the comments coming from one of the lead meteorologists in Birmingham online this morning points out the fact that we're just now beginning to get really good resolution on this, and there is certainly that possibility that this will be adjusted even more before we get to tomorrow morning. Now, is it adjusted up or is it adjusted down? I can't tell you. But understand, as we get into this, we told you this last night, and I've been saying it since we started talking about this storm system. It's the boom or bust factor, and it could go either way. We're trending toward the bust, but that could change. Bust being we just don't end up with anything. Boom being that you end up with more than you originally thought. And that'll happen. There'll be pockets where we will see more accumulation than we're forecasting. There'll be locations that won't get anything at all. The nothing at all folks are going to be closer to the I-85 corridor. The folks that have a greater chance of getting more than what's forecasted would be along the I-20 corridor and north, both in Alabama and in Georgia. So impacts across Alabama, and this you can just carry this on over into Georgia. Down there along the I-85 corridor, we're talking places like Auburn, Opelika, up to Lafayette, Valley, West Point, and then maybe into southern Randolph County, all the way up to Roanoke. Back over to the west, Mountain Valley over in Clay County, Alexander City, Dadeville, Camp Hill down in Tallapoosa, Sylacauga, Childersburg, Rockford, maybe even down to Wetumpka, northern Autauga County. How about that? Clanton up in Chilton County, up to southern Birmingham, and Tuscaloosa. You're in the limited impact area where winter driving conditions are possible. They should not be extreme, and they should only last for 3 or 4 hours tomorrow morning. So I'm telling you, you folks from Roanoke to Auburn, Opelika, back over to Alexander City and Rockford, you most likely will see some slick spots on the roadway tomorrow morning from pre-dawn up until about 9 or 10 a.m., and then things will improve. Driving conditions will improve. We switch over to all rain. It washes everything away, and then we just have a miserable cold rain for the rest of your Friday. From Roanoke over to about Ashland, and then to South Birmingham, up to the I-20 corridor, you're going to be in that elevated impact area, and we'll take that on over to the Heard County, Troup County line in Georgia, and then over to about Noonan in Coweta County, up to the I-20 corridor. Elevated impact area, meaning that hazardous driving conditions will be likely. closures and disruptions to infrastructure may occur. So the impacts will be a little bit more significant on that line, basically from Childersburg to just south of Ashland over to Wadley, Roanoke, and then to the Heard County, Troup County line up to about Newnan North. You will be in that elevated impact area up to the I-20 corridor. From I-20, and this is from Atlanta to Anniston to Birmingham to the I-22 corridor, northwest Alabama, north up there in that pink shaded area, significant impacts are expected. Dangerous or impossible driving conditions, widespread closures, and also disruptions and infrastructure may occur. So that's where the greatest impact is going to be, I-20 and north. And we've been saying that now for about 48 hours. So that portion of this really hasn't changed that much. So that's the way we have things this morning. Let's take a look at the radar, and I'll go ahead and show you the storm's already getting underway. We look out there into Oklahoma and Texas. We see snow in southern Oklahoma and then snow across northern Texas. We're seeing a switch to freezing rain and maybe just all rain down around Dallas. Also notice the precipitation that's beginning to form down in the Gulf of Mexico. We'll get that low to develop somewhere south of Houston or maybe just off the Louisiana coast, and that will happen later on this evening. And then that low-pressure system, like I said, is going to run right along the North Florida, Northwest Florida Gulf Coast, we think, maybe running across Northwest Florida and then across extreme southern Georgia before it turns off to the northeast. And, you know, the exact placement of the low is going to have a lot to do with how far north the warm layer goes. So the low hasn't developed yet. We've still got to watch it as it develops and see exactly where it starts and then get a good fix on the motion. So all of this could change again. And we've told you multiple times that, you know, we could see all of this change several times before we get to tomorrow morning. And then the forecast will be changing in real live time as we go through this tomorrow morning. That's just how difficult it is to forecast snow in the South. So I'm going to take a quick peek at the chat room. I can't stay in here much longer this morning. I've got several local radio interviews I'm about to do up here in northeast Georgia, and then we have a weather briefing at noon today at the EOC, so got to get ready for that, and then we're activating up here tonight because we are expecting up here in northeast Georgia to be in that 2 to 4 inch range. And I would expect for the most of the duration here in northeast Georgia, and I'm particularly talking about White County, Cleveland, Helen, and both the counties up here to either side of us. We're talking over into Lumpkin County and in Habersham, even down into Hall County, Gainesville, 2 to 4 inches of snow total accumulation. Could there be some pockets of 5, 6 inches? Yes, that's possible in the higher elevations. And we are anticipating travel issues here. And right now it looks like that we stay snow most of the day across northeast Georgia. We may switch over to a mixture, maybe some freezing rain late in the day tomorrow. And into the early evening hours before all precipitation comes to an end. So there is a little bit of a concern that we could get a glazing of ice on top of the snowpack toward the end of the event tomorrow afternoon, up to a 10th, maybe 15th of an inch, which that's going to put a little bit of a weight load on the snowpack that's already in place. And then the winds are going to turn out of the northwest at 20 to 30 miles per hour. So I'm a little concerned about the possibility of some scattered power outages up here in northeast Georgia late tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. Of course, travel is going to be horrific up here, and it's going to be frozen all night Friday night into Saturday morning. And then any residual moisture that's left Saturday night will refreeze for Sunday morning. So we've got a lot to watch up here in northeast Georgia, and so it's going to be a long day. We will be doing live weather updates on Dr. Don's weather throughout the day and throughout the night tonight. We'll be doing it from the Emergency Operations Center in White County. We'll be doing live updates up here in White County over on our White County Public Safety Facebook page and our YouTube page. So you folks down there in East Alabama and West Georgia, if you want to go like our public safety pages up here in Northeast Georgia, you can kind of see both. You can see what we're talking about for East Alabama and West Georgia, and also what we're talking about for Northeast Georgia. Atlanta, that's a big, huge question mark right there for Atlanta and Birmingham, quite honestly. You're going to both be right there on that division line between all snow and a mixture. In those areas, of course, any kind of weather is a high impact for Birmingham and Atlanta. So we're going to be watching those two locations as well. Best idea, if you have travel plans first thing Friday morning across East Alabama and West Georgia, change those plans. Don't do it. But I think by late morning, certainly by noon, driving conditions should be fine across East Alabama and West Georgia, and your weather will be improving. From a frozen precipitation standpoint, it's still going to be wet and cold and messy pretty much all day long across East Alabama and West Georgia. Enjoy your Thursday, and I'll be back with you later on today with the latest information as we continue to track this winter storm here on Dr. Don's Weather.